Yeah, welcome everyone. Today we're going to talk to you about a project maintainer's guide to tag security. So we're going to kind of talk about tag security and kind of our work with the OpenFGA project. And yeah, so I'm Marina Moore. I work at a company called Edera. I'm also one of the co-chairs of tag security, which is kind of the hat I'm wearing today. So.
And I'm Andres. I work at Okta, and I've been leading the OpenFGA project for the last 3 years. And I'm going to share today our journey with project in general and how we collaborated with tag security in getting it ready from a security perspective.
Yeah, so kind of as we've mentioned, our goal for today is to talk about the tag security resources for projects, but really kind of be specific about how we've worked with OpenFGA to hopefully help other projects in the room kind of see how this relationship can work for you as well. So I'll start with a quick overview of what is tag security. Tag security, or the Technical Advisory Group for Security, is a group that sits kind of under the CNCF. That's a collection of all kinds of folks. We've got enthusiasts, professionals, students, researchers, hobbyists, and everyone interested in the security of the cloud native space. And our mission really is to work with specifically CNCF projects, but really any open source project, to help improve the security of the ecosystem. And we do this both through direct interaction with projects, kind of, we'll talk about a lot of that interaction today, so I won't spoil the talk, as well as through kind of general guidance and white papers and stuff that we put out into the world.
So a very brief introduction to OpenFGA. So it's an authorization system for developers. You would use it if you want to implement authorization in your application. In a similar way, you could use Open Policy Agent for some scenarios. And it's based on a concept called relationship-based access control, that you can see it as an evolution of role-based access control and attribute-based access control. And it's inspired by a research paper that Google published a few years ago, where they described how they solved authorization internally. So they built a system they called Google Zanzibar, which it enabled any team at Google to implement authorization. And it's being used for every product, external or internal product at Google. And in that research paper, they described how to make it scale, and we took those ideas to try to make OpenFGA a product that can scale in similar ways. And we packaged those ideas in a server that you can run, and some tooling and SDKs to make it easy to implement for developers. These are some of the companies that are adopting OpenFGA. We have an adopters MD file in the repository where people can add their own, and whenever they want, they submit a PR adding themselves. It's interesting because the only publicly traded company here is GoDaddy, and they didn't do that. They just created a blog post explaining how to use it. And most of the people who are willing to put their names there are usually startups and smaller companies. But some of them are still pretty well-known brands, like Grafana or Canonical or Docker. We are in the process of being evaluated for incubation. So the project was donated to Sandbox in September 2022. So it's 2.5 years. And right now, waiting in the line until the KubeCon finishes and see if we can get some bandwidth from the teams and get it evaluated. I'm just going to talk a little about our experience in that process of moving levels. Is any of you running or maintaining a Sandbox project involved in maintenance? OK, some people, great. So, and what been happening here is interesting. We are seeing we applied for incubation like a year ago, and it was moving very slowly. During that time, the TOC, they changed from moving, having a list of requirements to an issue that is very well structured. So all the requirements are there. So you create an issue, and you need to check all the things you comply with, which makes it simpler. Those are the categories of things that you need to consider: application process principles, governance, maintainers, contributors and community, engineering principles, security, and ecosystem. And for all of them, there are some just suggested and required items. Right? And this is kind of our view of how they work. Some of them are under your control. So things that it just work, you need to do it. It takes time from the project team and to prioritize those things. So basic hygiene in the repositories with the right documents and the right artifacts, have meetings with the community, present to the tax security team and also do project reviews with them. That includes security assessments and also working on the security posture of the project in general. And so that is kind of takes work, but it's easy, right? You just need to go and do it. And the ones that are not easy are the ones that are more about influence. And the first one is you need people to be using the project. And it's obvious, you won't get traction and you won't get to incubation if nobody or a very small number of people are using the product. And then from that list of, in our case, we had like a 35 adopters that publicly said they were using the product. You need to pick from 5 to 7 that they are willing to be interviewed for the use case so the CNCF can get a better understanding of how is it working. And then the other piece, there's a lot of things that most of them are suggested that are about having good governance in your project. Right? And up to now, for OpenFGA, it's been mainly maintained by Okta. Right? And we have now a couple of people, one from Grafana Labs, another one that is an independent developer who are collaborating with us. But it's hard to build a governance system that works and if you don't have enough external contributors, right? Because if it's just built by one company, you don't need governance, right? Or it's easier to, you can take shortcuts, right? Once you have more companies using the product, that is harder, that is more important, and is when it happens. And those things usually happen while the project is in incubation, right? So we're kind of waiting for that to get better at having a better governance process working.
Cool. So yeah, so I'll start talking about some of the initiatives within tag security that kind of relate to this work with projects. So the first one we'll talk about a bit is the Security Slam, which is an initiative started in the past couple of years. I think 2 years ago was the first one. And the idea is that it's a kind of a metrics-driven security hackathon for CNCF projects. And the idea of it being metrics-driven is that, like, you really have actionable security items. There's a lot of security that's a little bit more nebulous, but for this we really focus on, things that can get done within the space of like a short hackathon. So once we kind of come up with that list of kind of actionable goals for the Security Slam, the next goal is to kind of bring people together to do it. And this is both existing project maintainers as well as new contributors, kind of get everyone in a room and working on these issues together.
So in 2023, there was one that was run, and that just before KubeCon that year. And the idea was that there were 5 badges, and for each of to win the badge, you have to do something around your projects, right? So they have the chronicler, inspector, cleaner, defender, and mechanizer. Each of them included doing some specific work in the project. Like the chronicler was about docs and having the right assets with the right structure in the repositories, complete the security self-assessment, have a CLO monitor score of 100%, in all projects, and then also have a way to create a software bill of materials and a way to validate those artifacts. What happened to us with OpenFGA is that we were working on improving our CLO monitor stack ranking at the moment, and someone from the tax security team, Eddie, reached out to us saying, yeah, we're running this security slam. Why don't you try to do the rest of the things and see how the project works? And we ended up being the only one who got the 5 badges, and that helped us in getting started in some of the security work that we didn't know about that was important, like doing a self-assessment for the project. And as part of that project too, we integrated with other tools from the OpenSSF that also can monitor repositories and give you a ranking, right? One is the OpenSSF's scorecard report, analyzes a few aspects of the project. We have a 9.3 score there, which is pretty reasonable. And then there's a best practices badge. This is more, you answer a few questions, and depending on your answers, you get a rating there and a rank. And so it's important in your projects to go through this, and that gives you, from outside, a good understanding of the project security posture.
So we're doing it again this year. So this year we're structuring it just a little bit differently, where we're focusing on a few different projects, and we have kind of curated lists of issues open for the Security Slam for those projects. And so the times and locations are up on the screen. It'll be in kind of the Project Pavilion area at KubeCon this year. I think there's 2 on Wednesday, and then 1 on Thursday and Friday. So hopefully folks can join for that. Oh, and there's prizes, so you should definitely come. Yeah.
Yeah, I think for each project, right?
Yeah, each project there'll be like a top contributor prize, or however we're going to restructure it. So yeah, come get some Legos.
Yeah, so if you have kids, or if you
Yeah.
don't have kids and like if you don't like Star Wars, then you don't need to do this, right?
Yeah, so the next initiative we're going to talk a bit about is the security assessments, which I think were mentioned a little bit earlier in the context of moving levels, which is probably where a lot of people see them. There's 2 different types of security assessments that we organize as tag security. There's the self-assessments, which are done kind of, as the name implies, by the project maintainers to kind of start thinking about security and kind of go through a list of questions and do some kind of like reflection on the security state of the project. This is required for incubating and graduating projects, so I think a lot of people run into it at that point. But we think it's a really nice way to kind of get projects thinking internally about security in a way that they can kind of manage themselves. Maybe you've already thought about all this stuff, which is great, but maybe there's something that hasn't come up yet, right? And this can kind of help highlight that. And then there's the opportunity for projects to do joint assessments. This is when the project, not just the maintainers of the project, but also folks within tag security kind of meet with those maintainers of the project and kind of talk about that self-assessment, talk about other questions they have about the security posture of the project, and kind of work together to kind of answer those questions, see if there's areas for the project to work on, and kind of, yeah, get that feedback in like a collaborative way.
So our experience there, so as I mentioned, we did the first version of the self-assessment as part of the security slam. And after that, a few months later, I think, one of the guys leading the tag security team, Justin Kapus, he had a team from the NYU working on assessing and helping in different projects. So they built like a group of people that helped review all of the self-assessments and improve them. And so we had their help, and as part of that, the self-assessment was moved from the OpenFGA repository to the tag security one, and with the blessing of that team. And later, we started working in our joint assessment. This is something where we reached out to tag security and asked for that. And they assembled a group of people that wanted to do that work. And what they ended up doing is, here you see the table of contents, but it's a pretty, I'm just going to explain this, but I think I'm going to just click it and share it. And there's a very long document with a lot of in-depth reviews of a lot of the areas of the project, right? So we're going to explain it more. But so compliance, security analysis. I'm not going to, of course, go over all the details, but just want to give you an idea of the depth of the analysis. So it's pretty deep, and it helped us to understand the project better and improve it in the areas where we needed help. Right? And then the other thing that we are using, that we are relying on tag security is sometimes we have questions about security. And this specific example was, so OpenFGA is an authorization product. If we make a mistake in a product, a bug in a product, when we tell you, yeah, the user has access to something, and that's wrong because we did a mistake in the evaluation engine, that is a security issue for all of our customers, because now someone is getting the wrong authorization response, right? So what we had is, we were working on performance of the engine a lot, and we had a flag that was an experimental flag where we were testing those performance improvements. And as part of doing the performance improvements, this was one part that we were so quickly that we returned the wrong value, right? And that implied, yes, if someone was doing, using this experimental flag, they could have a security problem. So we asked the team, and should we have a CVE for a scenario like this or not? And there were reasons to do it and reasons to not to do it, right? And their assessment was more, yeah, given this is there's a warning in the documentation saying you shouldn't be using this in production, and that having a CV impacted every user of OpenFGA now gets a warning that they need to update a project. Yeah, their suggestion was to not to do it. And we didn't do it. We just add something in the documentation saying if you are using this flag please update to the latest version without a CV. Right? And so having a channel to answer to those questions is very useful for teams. At Okta, we do have a security team that can help us to make a lot of decisions internally. But when they impact CNCF projects, it's good that you have someone from CNCF also give their perspective on how to handle this.
So another opportunity for projects to work with the tag is through tag security presentations. And we have two types of these. The first is kind of a more informal way to kind of share work happening in the community. That's what we call them, community demos. These are just 5 to 10 minutes at the beginning of our general meetings, which we have in a bunch of different time zones. I'll have that info later. But this is just an opportunity for projects, especially projects in the security space, just to kind of share stuff that's happening. And sometimes we'll even talk about new papers or new standards in the space and just kind of have a short discussion about stuff that's going on. This is a good opportunity for kind of, not really advertising, but just kind of sharing resources to the community. And then we also have an opportunity for longer form presentations. And this often happens when projects are moving levels in the CNCF. And I think this presentation process is actually going to be even more formalized by some of the new project review work happening from the TOC. But yeah, this is like a longer kind of 30 to 60 minute full meeting where the project gets a chance to present and then have a discussion with folks in tag security about anything that comes up, usually related to security.
Yeah, and on our side, we did both. So before donating the project to Sandbox, we presented it. That was in 2022. And later, when we were ready for, we believed we were ready for incubation and wanted to get the tag security support, and then we also presented it again. And yeah, we had better questions and was a more in-depth conversation at that moment.
So I'll do some quick hits of some other initiatives that the tag puts together. So we have a bunch of publications. This is one of the big things that we do as a group is create publications that we hope are useful for the broader community. Our big one is the Cloud Native Security White Paper, which we update every few years just to kind of give a big overview of what's happening in cloud native security. We also have specific ones for software supply chain best practices, for folks looking into digging into that a little bit more. The Cloud Native Controls Catalog, so there's kind of a deep dive into that, as well as a whole manual about our kind of threat modeling process, as well as one about the security assessment process in general. The security assessment process has actually been used not just within tag security, but there are folks in the Kubernetes project, as well as in the OpenSSF who are kind of using a similar version, and so these documents kind of help share those practices with the world in the spirit of open source. We also have various kind of sub-projects and initiatives that focus on some of these areas as well, doing kind of smaller things, helping projects as stuff comes up in the areas of like compliance, automated governance, software supply chain, and especially we maintain a catalog of software supply chain compromises. It's not a complete catalog, but it kind of gives an idea of the types of compromises in the space. Oh yeah, I have a page here from, this is our most recent publication that we did, is the V2 of our software supply chain best practices paper. I should have put a QR code on this slide, but it's available on our repo. So if you look that up, you should be able to find it. And finally, how to get involved with both, oops, sorry, I shouldn't touch my mic, tag security as well as OpenFGA. So the main way to find us is on GitHub or on the CNCF Slack. We also have community meetings in 3 different kind of time zone areas. The EMEA and APAC ones are bi-weekly, and the Americas one is weekly, so that second one is probably most relevant for this European audience, but really any time zone that you're available at, everyone's welcome.
Great, so on our side, we are also going to be in the Project Pavilion on Wednesday afternoon, and if you're a Sandbox project and you want to learn a little how this works for us, also feel free to reach out. And we found in general the relationship with tag security very valuable for us and in helping us navigating this process of being part of CNCF. So very grateful for your help.
Thank you. I think we have a little bit of time. So. Oh yeah, there's a mic here I think we're supposed to use for the questions, so if anyone has them.
Okay. You said you presented twice in the context of security, once for sandboxing, once for incubating. I just wonder, I mean, you chose what to present, right? Each time. So when you have a product, the security holes can come from anywhere. Like, for example, a GitHub action, right? Like it happened recently with security revealed. So when you choose what to present, it's very easy to focus on something that you think it's safe because you're on the side of the project. So you don't want, I mean, you're trying to incubate, right? So you don't want your project to look vulnerable. Obviously, you're focusing on how safe it is. If you knew that something is not secure enough, or if you completely ignore it, let's say, you will obviously not present it. So I'm just wondering, what is the value of presenting something that you already know is safe, other than, okay, you missed something and other people tell you, oh, you missed this or that. Obviously, you're presenting the most safe part of your project.
Yeah, so in general, when you do those presentations with CNC, when the tag security, it's not about they reviewing if your security is fine. They are usually presenting the project in general, and there can be a conversation about specific topics. Knowing that the security of a project is fine, of course, is probably never possible, right? There are certain practices that you need to follow, and that is what, as part of the incubation process, they can analyze, and why those assessments can help identify. So they build a threat model that helps you understand where the issues may be. That is documented. Some of the things are the team needs to do some things to mitigate those. So it's more about that, the work about how you make sure you are doing the right things from a security perspective, than in a presentation try to convince the audience that the project is secure, because that is probably impossible to do, right?
Yeah, so they're trying to set the processes right, if I understand correctly. So, because obviously it's not a one-off thing. I mean, after incubation, you still have opportunities to make your product vulnerable. So obviously they're trying to set up the foundation of having good processes, I guess, but so there was no, let's say, future auditing. Like after you incubated, nobody jumped in and said, "Oh, what are you doing there with your pipelines or with your delivery process?" Right? It's about setting the process right.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, but yeah, I think that the goal is really to provide guidance. We're not trying to be like a blocker. That's kind of not really our goal. I mean, obviously, if you're doing things that are incredibly like irresponsible, we'll tell people about it. But in general, the goal is to just kind of provide guidance and be a resource to projects. The CNCF actually has resources for projects to get security audits periodically, depending on resources, and those really do dig into like, can we find bugs today? But this is kind of a step like an abstraction above that. We're just really looking at processes and best practices, thinking about the edges of the project, that kind of thing.
Sorry, last one. Is it a gradual process, or is it like you prepare and then they do the audit? I mean, can you ask for someone to have a quick look and tell you a quick checklist of things you probably missed before you do the final one?
Yeah, so we actually think that the security assessment process is nice to do before you do a security audit, where possible, because that way you have all these ideas and all these things that you work on kind of more generally, and then if there are specific bugs after that, right, you can then find them. But hopefully it'll help guide the audit process more. So.
Okay,
Yeah, thank you.
And also integrating with this kind of tooling, that a scorecard or reviewing the best practices can also help you understand where the project is. So integrating with this is pretty easy, and you get a report very quickly. And so those things help you to understand at least the basic hygiene of the project.
Hello. So I have one question. We know that security is something that evolves all the time, so you're never secure. Which tool was in this step from the sandbox to the incubating process were actually useful for the static code analysis and for the licenses issues, for the dependencies issues? Because it's obviously not just dependable or renovate, updating all the time is useful, because you can have a bug on a dependency that is actually not affecting your code because it's using in some library that is actually not in use or stuff like that. So you can, because this tooling is actually to automate everything and then focus on the proper security analysis on that something we'll find out later. So which kind of tools were the best one?
Yeah, it's a really good question that I don't know I have a short answer to. I think the long answer is here. But the short answer I'll give you now is basically that, yeah, I think it's just a combination of looking at the tools, and we try not to say like, this is the only tool that works, but talk about properties and say, yeah, you want to be looking at your dependencies, but you don't need to waste your time with CVEs that don't impact your project. I think there are initiatives, the name is escaping me, of like seeing whether CVEs are like impactful. Does anyone remember the name of this? Anyway, there are initiatives happening to try and make this more automatable. And I think as those develop, right, we'll kind of keep sharing them out. And yeah, this is the real problem. This is one of the big things people come to us about, actually, is CVEs and responding to them. So this is definitely something on our radar that we're hoping to provide easier guidance on. I think there's a lot of guidance, but a lot of it's not easy yet.
And on the other side, when you're actually doing that security assessment or security review on anything, how hard was the manual process of finding the security bugs or security issues on the code? Because we know that something like finding a permission issue that allows you to escalate because someone misses something, that blah, 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 it's really hard. How difficult was it for you?
So there's one part there that is about, in the case of OpenFGA, what we need to have is like it's basically continuously improving our testing automation to cover scenarios of different combinations of how you define a policy, where you're making sure that you're covering everything in your testing, right? And for us, that is, we always believe we are fine until we find something, and then we need to keep improving, right? And so that is from OpenFGA for this specific thing. And this is more, for us, the challenge is that a bug in the system is usually a security issue, right? Other projects, it's not like that. A bug in the system is just a bug that doesn't imply a security issue. For us, a lot of them are security issues. And then the rest of the things which are more about static analysis, those are easier. It's just including the right tooling and reviewing the responses and the analysis and acting on it, right? But yeah, finding the bugs is hard, as any bug. Right? Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And Evan has also a great suggestion of tools you can use for static analysis.
Yeah.
Actually, it was not a static analysis tool, but I was wondering if you looked at using AI to help with generating those test cases.
No. Yeah. Yes.
It can be. My experience has been that sometimes it can be helpful for spitting out just a large number of tests, and then you have to figure out whether the test actually makes sense, but at least you don't have to start from a completely blank slate.
Yeah, it's like a fuzzing approach to...
Like a fuzzing approach,
like that, yeah.
but at a higher level than a protocol.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, you know OpenFGA, and actually like the combinations you can have with defining a model are pretty crazy, and so it's hard to, we had tried, it didn't work, but we keep trying.
Has anyone done work in AI-driven fuzzing? Oh, no, sorry, I'm going off on a tangent, but... All right.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Great. Thank you very much for all your questions, and see you around.